Alright, so here we are in this scene, and obviously this is a bit further than the last video, but I wanted you to see what the end product is, and I'm just going to kind of do an overview of a lot of these principles, then get to the rendering part of it. Okay, so what I've done is just laid it out the room just like I showed before. Okay, and then what I did was I exported the entire room, so I just grabbed all my pieces of geometry that are kind of important to the scene. And then I saved the room as this other file here. If I just go to open, you can just see it, but it's raw scene. So it's just the pieces of geometry in that scene. Okay, and then I made a new scene, or saved that scene as something else, as this cam setup one, so I could do all my dynamic stuff. Okay, now all my dynamics are just everything that we've already done. Okay, this here, I have this goo that's coming down. And if I switch back to RealFlow, you can see I've imported my scene. There it is. And it doesn't have the window cut out. I added that later for the ability to have light shining through the window. Here's my blocky sink. Oops. Here's my soap dispenser. Alright, and if I go to wireframe here, you'll see that I have a couple pieces of geometry in this that are just creating this gooey mess. Okay, and it's just this is stuff that I created inside Maya also and just brought it in, but it's just a bunch of planes. And if I turn off my mesh, you can see how the particles, there it is, there we go, are being born up here, and then they're just kind of falling down here, just so I can get this like trickling effect. So I get this trickling effect, and then at one point all those planes are going to disappear. You can see they stop becoming active, and then it just falls straight down. Okay, that way I can really control the goopiness of this. Because at one point I wanted to have this little stream coming, and then I have this like splash, and then it just starts to trickle at the very end. Okay, and so I was doing just what we've done before. Creating an emitter, adding these items to be colliding with those particles, and that's it. That's all those ones are doing. Okay, I made it a mesh, I exported it, and then I brought it back into Maya as this mesh. Now you'll see that it doesn't line up perfectly with that. That's not a huge deal. I could always scale this if it didn't match perfectly, because I did move some of my stuff around. Let me just put my pivot over here. You can see how I can scale that, because this is all locked in now. This is all just like locked in animation. So regardless of what the scale is and all that, it's still going to work. Now it might pop through the back. That's not a huge deal because I'm not going to see that. It may stick up the top. I don't care because I'm going to adjust that afterwards. Okay. Now what I also set up inside here is on this mesh under my RealFlow source, I added this guy as a clip cube. Okay, and what that means is that if I go to wireframe, you'll see all the extra pieces of goo that are inside here. If I just grab the cube, shift click the goo, and go to my RealFlow source and add that as a clip cube, and then I remove the RealFlow mesh, there we go, what it's going to do is clip out any of that stuff that's there. Okay. Now the other part that's here that's still showing, I could just grab this cube and just make that bigger and cut it off. And if it takes a second, there we go. Now it'll clip right there, right? Now that's not going to affect anything as far as shadows or anything else goes, because I'm not even going to render really this out. I'm going to render it without that, just the background, and I'm going to do all my cutting inside of post. Okay? All my masks and whatever else that I'll be doing. Alright, so then at that point, once I got this in, I could just texture it. And I gave it this Mia. Okay, I want to do Mia X passes for all of this. I gave it this yellowy color. There's a little bit of glossiness to it. I'll pull that back up. There we go. There's a little bit of refraction on it as well. Okay, now little bits of things are going to go great. If we try to get this to look, like a chrome sphere inside the room, it's not going to work because there's nothing out here for that to reflect. So we just have to be aware of that kind of stuff. Okay. So that's the goo. Now over here in the sink, I have this fluid effect, and this is just a smoke coming out of the sink. All right. Now if I go here, you can see my base resolution set to 120. I have an emitter. There it is. And it's just a basic emitter. I think I've upped the rate. It's an Omni. And nothing fancy there. And then a lot of this is done with just the same stuff that we've done before. Okay, adjusting my damping, adjusting my solver. I did slow it down, so I said my simulation rate scale is 0.6, so it's going to go a little bit slower. Let's see, content details. I adjusted some of these. I think this is actually default. I think I went to velocity and just added a little bit of swirl and a little bit of turbulence to this to get this to do what it's going to do. So if I just hit play, it's going to go slow, obviously. But you can see the effect of it. It looks like smoke coming out of here. Okay. Now it does, if I go back to the beginning and go to frame 1, you'll see that it starts here. I did cache this, and then I set my start frame to negative 200. In a lot of these dynamic simulations, I'm going to, if I go back to RealFlow, I sim this all the way to 350. In here, I'm simming things out to 300. I'm only rendering frame 0 to 120, but this allows me to basically pick what I want to see and utilize that instead of simming 1 to 120 and then being stuck with that. All right. So I simmed a lot more, and everything is cached, so it's exactly what I want to happen there. Okay. I have this other. I want to create this little dust floating in the air, so I created just an emitter, and that's it. There's just an emitter with some particles in there. I've given, if I grab the particles themselves, they're end particles, so if I go to, that was right, if I go to their rendering, shading, there it is, shading, they're rendered as clouds, and here's some opacity, here's some color. Okay, not a huge deal, just, I wanted some dust to be floating in the air. Up here under particle size, I gave them a randomized scale input, so they would be different sizes. So I set randomized ID and adjusted this so I have random thicknesses here. And I created this light. Okay, and that light is just kind of coming through the window so that I would have kind of this stream. If I look at the original image here, it has a stream of light. Now I could also do this inside of Nuke, is to get that stream with the particles, because I don't want all the particles to be, full on white, because that wouldn't look realistic. I want that stream of particles to be affected. Okay, so I could also do that inside of Nuke, but I was just trying it inside here to see if I liked the way it looked, and I actually do like the way Nuke does it better. So I'm actually gonna do anything with this. Okay. Now I do have, if we look at my comp here, whoops, and this is going through another iteration of rendering, unless it's done. Looks like it might be done. So let me go to my, well, let me show you the other stuff. So here's my test smoke. You can see how slow it looks like it's moving, and that's exactly what I wanted. I didn't want anything, going crazy quick. I just have this nice little smoke feature. And then over here, I'm going to have a piece of my wall break out. So if I hit play, you'll see that the wall kind of bursts out and breaks apart. And then there's a hole in the wall. Okay. And I also have, if I come down to, that's my smoke, that's that. I haven't imported that yet. Okay. I'm going to have another element here that'll be the smoke coming off of these little pieces. All right. And I'm just going to read that in real quick just so I can verify that it's still there, still looks good. That way you can see it as well. Smoke. Nope, not smoke. It'll be my particle smoke. Okay. So then here's my particle smoke coming off those pieces. All right. Now I am going to scoot this up some. There we go. Now I'll just take this particle smoke and just merge it in here. And it's going to be huge. You can see how big this is. So I just need to reformat it. I'm going to go over this again. I just want you to see just adding that in. There we go. Now you can see all little bits of debris and smoke coming off that. And obviously I could tweak that some more inside of Maya or Nuke or whatever. There we go. Okay, so now let's jump back to Maya and see how I did that one, because we never really went over that specific tool that I used for doing that effect. Okay, and the tool that I used was called DMM. So you'll see in here what I've done is I just created a cube and placed it at the same exact position as a tile. And actually what I did was created a plane and then extruded that plane so that it fit. And if you look from the side, you'll see that this is perfectly flush with that wall. Okay, if it's sticking out, it's going to try to calculate. If it's sticking out, it's not going to be no good. Okay, so I have to have it flush with that surface. Okay, so I'm going to go into a new scene just so it's kind of isolated. And you can see how that's done. So I'm going to create a cube. And DMM is a neat tool because it's built right within Maya. The only downside is that, or it works right within Maya, is that there's a limitation because it's a trial version. Okay, so under Windows Settings Preferences Plugin Manager, at the school you'll probably see somewhere, there it is, DMM plugin, and you could just load it. If not, you'll just go to Google and you wait for Google to load, and you'll type in DMM plugin Maya 2015, and the top one here, which is by Pixelux, will have this version over here that you can download, and you'll see that it's not available for Mac at the moment, so it's just available for PCs. So you can download the PC version or use the school's version. Okay. So once that's loaded, you get, you should have the DMM shelf. My DMM shelf doesn't want to load for some reason. Let me reload my plugin. And this could also be done inside of RealFlow. I just think it's neat to be able to do it right inside of Maya, as opposed to having to jump into RealFlow, tweak it there, and then jump back into Maya. Alright, my shelf still doesn't want to work. It's not a huge deal. I can get by without it. I just know what the buttons are on the shelf, so I use that. So I'm going to switch over to my DMM menu. And what I need to do is create a DMM object. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is take this cube and just add some divisions. So under Mesh Tools, I'm going to go to Insert Edge Loop. And I'm going to say multiple edges, and I'm going to say 4 and 4. So 4, 4. And you see how we get this nice little shape here. Okay, I'll delete the history. There we go. I don't want to freeze the transforms. I keep those as they are. So I'm going to go to DMM Assets, and then I'm going to say create a DMM object from Polymesh. Because it's a Polymesh, I'm going to create a DMM object. I'm going to leave everything else pretty much as default and hit create. It's going to go through some stuff that'll, might turn green, might not turn green, whatever. If I go to my outline, you'll see that we have a cube. There's my original cube, but now we have these 5 different things inside it. Okay, these are the 5 things that go into making this. So we don't want to delete history on this thing. We don't want to do anything, destructive to it. We will adjust some of our stuff as we go. Okay, so here's my DMM, and if I hit play, you'll see that it just falls down. So I'm just going to rewind it. The green color is gone. No big deal. It just happens sometimes. Now, if I created a ground plane, so I'm going to create a cube. Now, DMM has to have solid objects. I can't use just a plane and say that's my ground. It has to have a solid object. So here's my ground. And if I go to DMM, create DMM from polymesh again, and I hit play, you'll see that they both fall. Okay, rewind it. I'm going to grab that and go to DMM, edit DMM, and edit DMM object, make DMM passive. Okay, so now this is going to be a passive object, meaning that it's not going to fall, but now when I hit play, you'll see that this guy falls, and he's actually kind of bouncy. Let me put this up to 333. Okay, this is one of the neat things about DMM, is that it actually interacts with the surface, and we can tell it to, be a little bit jiggly or have some flex to it, and then break. Okay, so you'll see that he's just kind of a little bit bouncy. So I'm going to grab him and go up to DMM materials, assign new, and these are not textures. This is basically what that object is made out of. So if I went to, let's say drywall, okay, and then we just hit play, or rewind it first. I always rewind and then hit play. You'll see that just by changing that material, now it's going to interact differently with the ground and fall apart. Okay, so I like to just go through and just try to find one that seems like it's going to make sense. So ceramic, that one looks pretty neat. Okay, and if I need to, I can come and adjust it. Now with DMM, you have a bunch of objects inside of your attribute editor now that you've created it. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit tricky to try to find some of that stuff. Also, this is a new thing in 2015 that it's doing, is that once I've opened up my DMM, I can't resize my attribute editor. It's kind of a stupid thing. I don't know why they would not check that out, but it just really bothers me. I can't resize this vertically, which is what I need to do. Whatever. Okay, so let's see. Here we go. So way down here is my ceramic. Now here's the scene, so this is going to control the scene itself. So if I'm getting a lot of intersections, I can take my sub-steps up. When I'm ready to cache, I can click the cache button. Okay, so I need to go to the ceramic tab. And if I take one of these down, like, let's say I take the toughness down. So right now it's 40,000. Let me make it 1,000. Okay, rewind and play again. And it falls apart still. Okay, so let's go the other way, right? Oops. So I made it a lot tougher. And you'll see that now it's not going to break. So I can play with these settings until I get the desired results. This is, I think, 10,000. Okay. Now you might say, well, I need a lot more divisions here because this really isn't working. I need this to have, a lot more breakage to it. So under DMM object, one of these guys here, select, pretty sure it's right there. There it is. Change triangulation parameters. So if I click on this guy, I can change the quality of this. So I can make this, let's say, 25. Hit apply. I can also make the area bigger. And then rewind it and just make sure. Nope, that wasn't it. Alright, so I figured out my mistake. And this is why it's nice to have the shelf when you're used to using the shelf. So instead of going to create DMM object from polymesh, I want to go to with auto cage. Okay, and in here I can specify a target count. So I'm going to specify this to be 500, let's say, and hit create. And what this is going to do is it's going to create this mesh on top of my mesh. I can rewind it and then hit play. And what you'll see is now this thing is composed of those 500 faces. Now we can't see the thing breaking, so let's go through and grab this. Go to my materials and reassign the ceramic to it. And you can see this thing shattering and breaking and colliding with each other. Now they are going through each other, so it's not a perfect system, but it's from where we're going to be at, it's going to be fine. Okay. Now, one thing I don't want to do is on that tile is I don't want all the bricks to just start falling. I want them to stay in place around the edges but fall through the middle. So that's where we can grab our mesh here, and under DMM assets, I can say add new DMM passive region. Okay, and what this allows me to do is create one of these little cubes, and I put it, right there at the border of where this is at, and then I hit play, and what you'll see is that it's staying in place. Now this is falling, but that top row is staying in place. So now let's rewind it. I'll grab it again. I'll add another one. No, it's saying make it into a passive region. No, I want to add a new passive region. Again, where that really helps is to have your shelf there if you're used to using the shelf. Now you cannot duplicate these because there's certain connections happening on each one of those. You see, I'm just creating this little frame around it. So now when I hit play, you'll see that nothing happens. It just does not move at all. So now I can go into my DMM assets and just make a new primitive, and I'll make a sphere. And I'm going to go to the edit object, make it passive, and then I'm just going to set some keys for it. So I'll set a key here. I'll go up a little bit. Set a key there. So now when I rewind it and hit play, you'll see that sphere breaking through that thing. Now if the pieces are too big, again, I can at any point grab this, go to my edit DMM object, edit auto cage, and set this to something higher. So I believe it was 500 before, so if I go to 1250, it's going to think for a second. And you'll see here, this is one of the issues that we have with DMM, is that I've hit the limit. Okay, so let me grab that again. And it was 1200, so let's go 1000. I'm just going to rewind it and hit 1000. And then hit play, and still we're off of our license, so let's go down to 850. Rewind it, hit apply. Still. Now this is also including this sphere back here. It's including the ground. There we go. So 700 seems to be a magic number that allows me to utilize this. Obviously, if I needed more, or I needed more detail, I needed more, anything out of this, I could jump to RealFlow with those objects and create it inside there. Okay. So now you can see that it's interacting with the ground. The ball flew through it. Now, in my original one, let me jump back to my other scene. That's the essential, that's the basics of it. One more thing just to see it is that on that scene node, there it is, we would just set cache. I also did capture. And then when I rewind and play, it's going to actually start writing this information out to your hard drive, so that next time we can just scrub through and not have to worry about, is it going to still hit the same way and interact the same way. And then we can turn the sphere off. We can actually delete the sphere if we didn't want it anymore. I'd say that's good. So now you can see I can scrub inside this area that's already been cached. Now past this, it hasn't, but here I can. Okay, so we jump to my other scene. My other scene. Cam setup. Okay, and that's what I have here. Now it looks like it's a finer mesh, and it's just how I had it laid out is what made that difference. Okay, so take a little time and you can get something pretty nice there. And as I scrub through, you'll see that I have those pieces falling, and then these little particles that are trailing it are the same way we did the buildings particles. Okay, that's what those are. And then if you look in here, you'll see that there's, some sort of opening right there. And there's the spheres that are colliding through it. I have those on a layer so that, those go away. We don't see them anymore. And I also created, if I jump to the back of this, there it is. I created this plane back here just so that as I'm doing my particle things that they shouldn't collide, but you see that, the one is colliding, so it's not a huge deal. I'm also using that as a hold for this thing. Okay. Alright, so those are my dynamic things. Now I could add more. I could add something, crawling out of this hole or whatever it is I need to do or would want to do. But it's really open to what your specific scene is kind of leading you towards for all of that. Okay. Now, as far as rendering these go, we never want to render everything just as one because we want to be able to tweak and manipulate these things to make sure that they're all tied in together. Okay. Just so you can see, let's go here. Here's my original shot. And so far, this is my end shot. Okay. Now, it's still rendering out some of my passes, but you can see what everything's looking like. Now I can see over here that the smoke is way too bright in this area. So what I can do is create a mask and just kind of darken out that smoke. Now if it wasn't rendered separately, then I couldn't do that. Also, if you look, I have these little dots here. That's my little particles kind of floating through the air. And these guys are, some are big, some are small, some are in focus, some are out of focus. There's none in the shadowy areas. They're all right here in the middle. And again, because I rendered things out separately, I could do that. So your next stage, after you've created all your dynamic stuff and you're ready to implement the rendering phase, then it's simply a matter of adding textures to your objects that need it. So over here, I added some texture to these rocks. I added some texture to my smoke. The texturing part of my geometry itself was done by creating or using that initial camera, assigning to each object a material. Okay, and I'm sure I'm on my right layer. I am. And that material is this surface shader here. Okay. And on that surface shader, I just mapped a file. Now instead of going to just left clicking on file right here, I right clicked and went to as projection. Okay. And then once it was created, this is where I went to file. I loaded in that file. I went back to projection and I told it was a perspective projection. And then I went to camera projection attributes and I picked that camera. And then I just ensured that it was set to match the film gate or the resolution gate. Nope, the resolution gate didn't work. That's right. So I went to film gate, and I set that to be a vertical because horizontal didn't work, and fill didn't work either. Okay. There we go. All right. So that's how that got lined up the way it got lined up. Okay. Now for the DMM stuff, if you assign a material to it, I have to go into my DMM object, which is actually inside this group, pplane 2, and I have to go open up this and grab the output shape, and then I would assign that surface shader to that shape. Okay. Now because this is constantly a projecting item to this, I also have to grab the surface shader after I've assigned it. And under rendering, I have to say texture, create texture reference. And what that does is it creates a reference object so the textures are locked in. Okay. So that's the texturing part. Now, when we get to the rendering part, I It's just a matter of getting each element to look correct. Okay, so what I did was I broke it down into each individual element. So let's first go with this smoke right here. Okay, so I grabbed that and I made a new layer under the render layers. And Maya's going to crash on me. Alright, now once it opens, there we go. Jump back to that perspective view. Alright, so I'm going to grab this. I'm going to make a new render layer. And I'll call this new fluid smoke sink, whatever you want to call it. And then I would just render it out and just make sure that I'm getting exactly what I want to get on that specific layer. I'm going to keep in mind the environment as far as what I want. Okay, so right now I'm not seeing anything, and that's because there's no lights. So I'm going to go back to my master layer. I'm going to grab my initial light. I'm going to right click. I'm going to add it to that new fluid sink. And then render it out, and I'm still not getting anything. I believe this light just may be... oh, this light is only for specific objects. So let me go back to my light linking, light centric. And I'm just going to verify that that light is on all of my objects. And it appears it is. Okay. It's still not showing up. Let me jump to perspective and just verify that it is hitting it. It may not be hitting it exactly where I need it to. It also may not be bright enough. 4,000 should be good. But let me make this 41,000. That way I can really verify whether or not it actually is lighting it up. Okay, if you go to an extreme and it's still not lighting it up, then there's something else happening here. I'm just going to double check my render stats. Should have been fine. Let me take my render settings and just verify that I'm set up correctly. It's fine. And sometimes it helps too to just make an object and put the object in that space. You know, it'll tell you whether or not the object is being lit, or if it's just the lighting itself, or if it's the scene. And you see the object's not getting lit up, so that means that something is awry. If I go to my wireframe or my alpha, it's still there. So let me grab the camera. I'm going to turn on illuminate by default just to verify that maybe that's why it's not rendering. Yep, that was it. So just wanted that button checked on there. Even though I went to the other setting and changed it, didn't like not having that. There we go. Okay, so let me delete that sphere now that we know that that the camera is working. There's the particles, and there's an alpha channel for it. Okay, so now I'm knowing that inside of Nuke or inside of After Effects, it's very simple. I just take this, drop it on top, and it has an alpha channel, so I can cut it out. Now, if it didn't have an alpha channel, I would have to consider, is it something I just want to drop on top and just, you know, use the black as a plus operation, or if I actually want to make sure I have an alpha channel for this to come out of. Okay. And I like having an alpha for every object in the scene. It makes things a lot easier. Alright, so that layer is done. So I'm going to go to my master layer again, and then I'll grab this, there we go, I grab the smoke trail, but I want to grab those particles. So N particle 1, I'll grab the light as well. And I'll make a new layer, and these will be called new floating particles. And then when I hit render, I should see floating particles. Now, like I said before, I'm going to do that transition of light inside of new. If I check my alpha, you can see I actually have more than is showing up there, just because my light is just not lighting all of them up. And that's fine. Okay, so that guy's pretty much done. Let's see, what else? We have these things over here. Let me jump to my regular perspective. Okay, this is going to be done the same way as we did in the rocket one. I'm going to grab these guys here, grab this room, and of course grab the light. And most of these, the light will be on. I can't think of why we wouldn't keep the light on. New wall breaking. And I'll actually make another one because I know I'm going to need that for the pieces. Okay. Now I don't need the particles on the pieces one, so I can just right click and remove those from that. Okay. So now let's look at the wall breaking one. Let's switch back to our other perspective view. We'll hit the render button and we'll see what we get. It looks like pretty much nothing is showing up. If I go to my alpha, there's the stuff, but it's nothing here. Now this light is not able to bounce around the room because there's no final gather or anything on there. So I think I'm going to remove this light from my scene, or from that layer. And I'm just going to create a directional light. I'm just going to set it to like 0.5. Maybe a bit more. Say 1.2. Alright, now the coming up blue, I obviously don't want that, so let me go and assign my shader that I created for them. Alright, so there's my dirt. Now if I go to my alpha, you'll see that they're nicely cut out, but I don't want the plate in here or any of these pieces. Okay, I still need them in the scene because I need them to, for alpha channel purposes, to cut out because they're interacting with each other. So I'm going to go and create a Lambert. And the Lambert, I'm going to call this black hole. And under the matte opacity, I'm going to change that to black hole. And so now when we render this, that should come up completely black with just my smoke. Yep, there's just my smoke. If I switch to the alpha, you'll see that we don't have anything else happening there. Okay. Now I also want to take this guy here and make him black hole, which he is. Okay, just making sure that he was black hole. Good. All right, so we have some smoke. And that's that layer, and if we zoom in, you can see where the chunks of the concrete would be showing up too. So now we'll go to this layer. And again, I don't think I'm going to get anything with this specific light, so I'm going to remove it. I'm going to go back to my outliner. I'm going to grab that directional light we just created and add that to the scene. Okay, so there's my pieces of geometry. If I go to my alpha, you'll see that they're all separated. Okay. Now, I don't get an alpha channel or a shadow pass or anything like that, and I really want to get shadows to happen on there. Okay. Because right now it'll look like it's kind of fake in the scene, not really seated in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these pieces, and I'm going to go to a contribution. I'm going to say create and associate pass contribution map. I'm going to grab this, do the same thing. Alright? And then just to verify, it didn't assign it. Okay? So I'm just going to double click the first one. We'll call that wall. Double click the second one. Call that pieces. Okay, so I'm going to right-click on the wall, right-click on the wall, and say Add Selected. Grab the pieces, right-click on the pieces, Add Selected. Okay, so now I have two contribution maps. Now what I can do with these, okay, we have the same rendering happening, but I'm going to go to my render settings, and under passes, I'm going to create a new render pass. So I'm going to create a shadow pass. And let me just verify which one I want. There's two different ones, and I did some playing around with this, and this is how it goes. You just grab a test scene, and you play around with it. So here is my shadow on the wall, and here is my raw shadow on the wall, and I want the raw shadow. So I'm going to take the raw shadow there. I want the matte. And that should be good. Also ambient occlusion. There we go. Okay. So I want those three guys. And I'm going to do a pass suffix of wall underscore pieces. Okay. And I'll do another one of pieces underscore pieces. Okay. So now I'm going to grab all those ones I just created. So there's pieces, 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 wall pieces, wall pieces. Okay, so I'm going to associate those with this specific render layer, and then I'm going to grab them and associate them with their specific object. So here are my pieces pieces. Here's the pieces. I'm going to associate it with that. And then the wall pieces, switch this to wall and associate it with that. Okay. Then I'm just going to double click my ambient occlusion. There it is. And I'm just going to set up some of my ambient occlusion settings. So I know that I want to override it. I know my spread should be like 0.125. My max distance should be 0.5 or so. Okay, that's going to be the same thing for this other one. So now, if we close that and close that, and we do our rendering again, okay, you'll see same rendering, everything looks exactly the same. But now if we come over to File, Load Render Passes, and we go to AO, okay, there's nothing here for the wall. So I'm going to go to my layer and choose AO Pieces. There we go. So there's the ambient occlusion for the pieces. Here's the ambient occlusion for the wall. There's nothing really there. Here's the matte. Here's the matte wall. Here's the shadow. And here's the shadow wall. Now there's nothing showing up on the wall. And the reason for that is because the wall is set up to be the black hole. Okay, if you remember, we set this up to be black hole, which is basically just like don't do anything with it. So I'm going to make a new Mia. I'm going to call this dull Mia. Okay, there's no reflection, no specular on it. It's just gray. Okay, now I should have rendered the wall. Let's find out if it's just being silly. Nope. Alright, at some point I turned off some options inside of my attribute editor for the wall. That's why it wasn't showing up there. So now I'm going to get a gray room, which is fine. Because you'll see what we're going to be able to do. I do have the shadow of the pieces on the wall, which is what I wanted. I could adjust that too. It looks like it might be a little bit too bright or too sharp. So I just grab that light. I come down to my shadows, I take this light angle up maybe to like 5. About 15 rays and a ray depth of 1. Then we should get some softer shadows, which is ideally what we want. Okay, because remember the light's coming in the window, and it's just kind of, filtering the room, and it's bouncing and hitting this. All right, I just want something there so it looks like it's hitting the wall. So the objects are, a little bit closer to the wall. All right, that should be good. Let me just finish this little chunk here. All right, so now if we go to the alpha channel again, you see the alpha just blows it out. It's gone. But if I come back to my render passes now, okay, this is the ambient occlusion for the pieces. Here's the ambient occlusion for the wall. Here's the matte for the pieces. That's what we really need. There's the matte for the wall. Here's the shadow for the pieces. There's the shadow for the wall. Okay. Now there is something happening here. I could grab the wall and tell the wall don't cast shadows. Okay. That way we would just have the shadows from this stuff. Now we do have a lot more pieces here than we were seeing before. So let's render this again. Just that little chunk. And we're fortunate in that our camera's not moving, so we don't have to worry about anything crazy as far as masks go, because we can just create some simple masks to cut other stuff out. All right, so here is there's the alpha, or the ambient occlusion for the pieces. Ambient occlusion for the wall. You'll see that there is some stuff there. This piece, that black piece there, is like solid black for some, because it's being cut out. Let's see the matte. That's good. The matte for the wall is there. Shadow for that. Shadow for that. Okay. Alright, so that should be good enough for now. And the same way we did this one, if I jump back down to my master layer, is the same way we would do this goo. Okay, we'd have one layer for, or one contribution layer for the goo, one contribution layer for the background, and we would set those things up. Okay. Alright, so once we have everything separated here inside of Nuke, let's bring it all in and take a look and see what we have. Okay. So I'm just going to read in my files. So I have this guy. There we go. So I have these guys here. And I also have my image there. Okay. So I have my dust. There we go. There's my dust. There's my smoke. There's my goo. There's my wall breaking. There's the smoke for the wall. And there's that background. Okay. Now, some of these, like the wall breaking, has hidden layers. You can tell by this little green notch here. So there's the ambient occlusion for this that you can see right here. And again, it's not showing this, but I can fix that later just by adding a little mask. Here's my diffuse. Here's my matte. Okay, and you'll see there's extra stuff happening inside there, which I probably wouldn't even use that specific matte. There's the shadow. Making sure I have the right one. I do. Okay. There's that. Okay. And then there's my goo. Same setup here. There's the ambient occlusion. RGB. smoke. Again, I'm just double checking my goo. Is that? Yes. Okay. Alright, so let's start with the very basics. So we have this, and I need to get that smoke inside here. So I'm going to go for my smoke, because this is one of the back items. Okay, I don't want to do anything that's a front item right now, because then everything else will be on top of it. So I just take this and merge, and then view. Okay, now you'll see that my smoke is actually like streaking. If I look at this image, the size of it is 1920 by 1080. The size of this is 960 by 540. So I just need to reformat this guy. And just make sure he is set to 960 by 540. And then it'll match, it'll fall right in place. Now you'll see it's actually a little bit off. I want it more over and a little bit down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to hit T for transform. I'm going to hold control and drag this pivot over here, and then I'm just going to move it where I need it, right about there. Now it might cut it off, which is what it's doing, so I can just scale it up a touch. Oops. Right there. Perfect. Okay. Now if I close this, you'll see that it also looks like the smoke might be in front of the sink. I don't want that. So I'm just going to go and add a roto. So I'm just going to go after the transform and type in roto. And I'm just going to draw a little shape around the edge of the sink. Basically where I want to cut it off. Right there. Okay, now turn black. So I'm going to come over here to my color, which is the second one. And I'm going to say alpha, go to black. And what that's going to do is basically take the alpha out of that area. Alright, so if we look at this here, oops, come on, there we go. And I hit A, you'll see the alpha and the object actually match pretty good. If I go to my roto and hit 1, you'll see that now this has been cut off. Before, after. Before, after. And then when we go to this, you'll see that it's cut off right there. Now I could, just to prove it, pull it up some more. Alright. It's not cutting it off. Why aren't you cutting it off? Oh. The order I have those in is the reason why it's not cutting it off. That's fine. I'm just going to add a pre-multiply after this. And you'll see that that will cut it off. Now we did lose some volume there, so if we needed to, we could always come back to a grade in the middle of this. Switch this to alpha. And just adjust some of these parameters here just to kind of maintain the shape that we had originally. Okay. Now it looks like there's a mirror behind this, and I want to capture some of this smoke inside that mirror. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I like everything that's up here. Okay, I'm actually going to swap. That's fine there. It's over. I like everything that's here, right there. Okay, even the pre-malt I like. All right, but I want to have another piece of this that I want to use. I basically want to duplicate all this stuff. So what I can do is add another transform. So I just clicked out nowhere, and I'm going to add another transform. Okay. And so now this transform, if I view it, you'll see he's just sitting there. I'm going to hold control, move his pivot over. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to merge it in. But again, because I'm going to do this in a certain order, I want this to merge in beforehand. So this is going to be my reflection in the mirror. So I'm just going to take the transform and hit M, bring it on top of there. And then if I use the transform and scoot it over, I'll move it way over just so you can see it. You'll see here's this guy. And if I look at this here, you'll see I have two smokes. So here's one, and there's the other. So I'm just going to kind of position this. Let me rearrange this a little bit. I want to make sure this is nice and neat. The easier I make this to read, the easier my life is. Okay, so that should work there. Okay. So now I'm going to take this and just add a defocus. I could also add a blur, which, if it doesn't look good, I'll add that. Yeah, I think I want to add that. Okay. The defocus is just going to keep a little bit more of the brights in there, where the blur just kind of blurs everything, evenly. There we go, something like that. Okay. Now I also have this issue of I want to cut this off right here. I don't want this to be floating around. So again, I'm going to add a roto. And I'm just going to go to this corner, to that corner. It doesn't have to be exact as far as that goes. But I just want to make sure I capture the top and the bottom. Okay. Now same thing, I'm going to go to the color, change this to black, and then I'm going to hit invert. There we go. And then in here you can see where the pre-multiply is actually inside this. So if I say pre-mult RGB, you'll see that it inverts it. There we go. And so just by, again, making sure this is set to black, making sure this is on RGBA, and then I can make this not inverted, and then we'll be good. Okay, so essentially you just play with it until it works. Let me go to the blur now, or actually the merge, and I'm just going to knock this blending down. I don't want it to be as bright. Okay. So now if you look, you'll see that I have a reflection of that smoke inside the mirror. Okay, and if I need to adjust, I just grab and I move it, and it moves the smoke. It doesn't move the mask, which is awesome. Perfect. Okay, so that part's done. So I'm just going to just help me isolate some of these things. Let's pull that up. I'm going to grab this whole mess here, hit tab, and I'm going to add a backdrop. And the backdrop, I'm just going to double click, and I'm just going to call this smoke in sink. That way I know it's a smoke inside the sink. Much easier. If I give it a label here too, much easier to read, especially when we're back like that. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the next area, and the next area I'll do is the goo. Okay, now this one I didn't render out my shadow yet for it. So this one I'm just going to drop in as a merge, render out my shadow, and then do the same thing I'm going to show you in the next part of this. Okay, so there's my goo. Wonderful. All right. So now let's go to the particle smoke. And it all starts with a merge. That's how we do this. We just merge it in, and we preview it, and then we see where we're at. Oh, this guy here I've also rendered out bigger, so he's actually way up there. So I'm going to reformat him as well. There we go. Sometimes with particles you just don't get enough detail when they're super small. So render them out twice the size, and that way you get plenty of detail. Alright, so there it is on top of that. Here it is coming out. Okay, so I'm going to just take this wall part 2 and just merge that in as well. Alright, now see there's a mess. You know, there's something here, there's some junk happening here and here, and I really don't want any of that other stuff to be happening. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to go and look at the channels. So let's look and see what we have. If I look at my matte, you know, that's all over the place. If I look at my diffuse channel, that's exactly what I want to see. If I look at my shadow, that's where I want my shadow to be. And there's nothing in spec, just diffuse. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this here, and instead of merging my RGB, I'm going to merge my diffuse. And so you'll see that the diffuse, it just pops right on top. Now it doesn't look like it's matching that, but if I added a grade, and I change my channel to diffuse, I could adjust the coloring in this so that it does match. I think I'm going to need to go through and re-render that part out again. I thought that was good. So I'll just leave it there for now. And I'll re-render that out, and I'll show you on the other one how I ended up getting that to work. Okay, so now I have my dust, which is right here. And you'll see that in this one, this is the one I didn't like out of Nuke, because my light didn't do the job I thought it was going to do. My sparkles are up here, and there's none really in the area I need them to be. So if I look at the alpha channel, the alpha has all this information. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy my alpha. So I'm just going to go here and say copy, and just put it right back into itself. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say copy the alpha into the red channel. Copy the alpha into the green channel. Copy the alpha into the blue channel. Okay. Now I could also do this, just so you can see what the end result looks like. That's my RGB channel. Okay. Here it was before, kind of soft. There it is there. Right. So I can also do a shuffle. And what the shuffle is good for is saying that I want to take my alpha and use that for red, green, and blue. So same thing, easier to do. Alright, so merge, put this on here. You'll see how much dust that we have inside the scene. And I really only want to have the brighter spots be right in this center area. So again, here comes Roto. Let's just scoot that over. I'm just drawing this shape. If I need to, I can adjust. Okay. And if I click on these little lines coming out, I can pull them to create some softness here. That's your feathering. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to take my roto, and again, I'm going to leave this white, but I'm going to say invert, and there we go. Okay, so now we should have the, if I look at this, and we look at the alpha, oops. Actually, I'm going to take this and make this black. That's what we want to do. There you go, and then invert it. So make the alpha color black, and then invert it. And now we have black on the outside and white down the middle. So now when we look at our image here, it looks like it's all over, which it is, because we haven't pre-multiplied. Okay, and you can see how now we've limited how many are bright and sparkly. I'm going to take this roto and just shrink it down a bit, because that feathering just went out a little bit too far. So now you can see that those particles are just floating right in the center. Okay. Now we can, again, adjust some of the coloration afterwards. I can do a little blurring on it. Now what I did before in my other one was I actually had two layers. And I took and transformed one of these bigger. Copy that roto and the and the pre-mult. And I'm just going to merge these two guys together. And what you see is here it was before. Now with this one we have some that are crisp and clear and some that are a little bit not so crisp and clear. Let me fuzz these just so you can see it better. Okay, so we can drop those on top of that. And you'll see we get another level of particles happening inside here. Okay. Now some of the stuff like this white is too white. This goo, I'm not really happy with the coloring of that. I'm not really happy with the coloring of that. So now we can go through and just start adjusting some of this stuff. Okay. So let's go to our smoke that's up here. And I'm just going to add a grade. And I'm going to do it up here. So I'm just going to add a grade. And I'm going to go and adjust my coloration. Now this is going to happen by going to my gain and Control-Shift clicking on one of these tiles. And you'll see how I'm getting this tint, disable that, it's making it look like it's more seated in the room. Okay. I can also grab the black, Control-Shift, and click on one of the black spots of the scene, and that'll give me a little bit too. This, it's a bit too much. That's good. Okay, and I can play with the multiply too if I wanted to adjust that. I can go back to my original merge and tweak how much that's happening, or go back to my original grade for the alpha and adjust that as well. Okay. So that looks like it's seated more inside the room. Here's my goo. Again, I'm going to adjust it more after, just so you can see. I can adjust the coloration on it. I can do the same little trick, grabbing the gain here, Control-Shift, and clicking on one of these whiter spots. And tweak that as well. Okay. Same thing for the smoke. One thing with the smoke though is that we have to kind of darken it down here. Okay, so I'm going to add another roto here. And it's going to be about this area. You can see where it's pretty dark in here. Okay. Now I don't want to use this for alpha. I actually want to create a new mask called smoke adjust. Smoke here, and then adjust there. And what I can do is then create a grade, darken the whole thing, let's say like kind of like that, and then just use this mask, smoke adjust. Now it's only going to affect that. There we go. Okay, so that's cool. I could actually copy this mask or still use this mask down here for this one. So I could copy this, paste it here, and oops, that's a grade on the roto. And instead of being smoke.mask, I'll make a new layer and call it, no, that's fine, smoke.mask works. Okay, so I can adjust that as well to get that to look like it's actually falling into shadow right there. Okay, so now let me come over to my other one so you can see all the work that I did on this one just to get some more stuff happening inside the scene. So here's that original smoke that I talked about. Here's the grade. Here's the transform. There's the defocus. There's the roto. And the pre-malt for that one. And then here's the other one, roto, pre-malt. And then there's my two merges. So I have it in the mirror and then in the sink. Okay, same thing I did over there. So here is the particle smoke, which is there. And for this one, I just did a reformat. I went into more detail on the other one, darkening this up. Now my breaking wall, I did a bit more stuff to it. So here's my breaking wall. I had a nice clean alpha over here, but I have a roto shape that looks like that. And this roto is basically allowing me, where is that connection right there? Allowing me to have a cutout here, so that I actually have a blackness behind this instead of just the beige color that's in there. Okay, so instead of it just being that, there's a shadow, there's a black hole that I put here. As far as this roto, you can see right there at constant, copy the alpha, and then use that as, oops, sorry, wrong one. Constant, the roto, there we go. And then now we have a hole right behind this that I could have, you know, something fly out of. And then here is the goo. Again, there's a transform, there's some rotos, and some adjustments to it. All trying to get it to look like it's nicely blended in the scene. Again, I had to cut off this so that it wouldn't look funny. I also adjusted it so it fell further down. So before, if I go back to this transform here, you can see that it just doesn't look like it's hitting the ground correct. So I just moved it down. Another good thing about doing layers, and then I just rotoed. Oops. Rotoed that shape just so it was clipped correctly. Okay, and there's my dust. There's all the stuff I did to the dust before, just like I showed you. And here's my final-ish image, still, you know, rendering some stuff out to tweak it. Now in this last bit, we just do the same stuff we've done before. Oops, not that. I'm going to do a merge. This is the A, and it's the B. This merge is set to a multiply, which makes it extremely dark, but we're going to add a little roto off to the side. And the roto is just going to be this shape right in the center that we can then fan out and then invert. We've been doing this since our very first projects. Okay, and then we could also grab this guy and add a grade and tweak some of our final colorations. There we go. So then we're basically, this is just taking that boring scene that we had originally way up top. And just giving some life to it. So you can definitely see the difference. Let me go to one of my more action-packed scenes. There we go. Definitely see the difference in what we're trying to do. Just create something that looks like it has a little bit more going on than just a boring still image. Okay, so that's essentially that's it, and every scene's going to be different. So the biggest challenge for you is just figuring out how to do each one of these, which you've already done, but then how do you break it apart to get those essential elements? Okay, and then bringing in the nuke is just, you know, it's nuke. You could also use After Effects for this. If you're more comfortable with After Effects, you're free to do that as well. I'll show in class a demo on how to do this in After Effects, or just an overview of how to do it. Alright, so that's your dynamics.